Hey everyone, it's Leigh with Arts Council OKC Creative Aging Program, and this week we're going to do some pencil drawing, and so we're going to draw some ducks using the hatching and cross-hatching technique. So we'll just kind of we'll go over the basics kind of as a refresher, or if you don't know what that is, then you'll learn. And so the materials this week are easy. We're doing a number 2 pencil, sketch paper, and a big eraser, and I always have a pencil sharpener handy too. That makes it helpful. So all right, let's get started. Just clear it off here. Okay. Anyway, I'll work on a couple of examples during the video, but I wanted to have one ready to go so that you guys could see it. And I've got a couple of mallards. I'm going to do, this is a Mallard Hen, and so she's a little fuzzier than a normal one, straight up mallard. But so basic, simple, you can do an oval shape. And then on what I did on her here is to keep from having such a hard line, I just kind of did, little lines to not have a solid line. So, and you can also go back and use your eraser to kind of break that up. And then just as a refresher on hatching and cross hatching, basically hatching is just doing little lines, and you can make them straight, you can curve them, and you can also, what we're going to do is kind of do directional ones as well, because we're doing a duck which has curves. Okay. And then cross-hatching just means you're taking these lines and you're going back over them to make a hatch mark. And you can still do the same thing on a curve, okay? So we're going to do a combination of both just to kind of add some texture and contrast. So really pretty simple. You guys can totally do this. And then just to show you on this duck, I did the basic shape of the duck. He's kind of a fun, happy guy. And I just kind of did little bits in here, which are just hatch marks. And then on some of the darker areas, I went across it and did cross-hatching just to kind of give it more contrast so that you know that this is in shadow or it's darker in color. And then this is, just basic drawing. So this does not have to be perfect. Just getting you started. And it's okay if you have some extra lines, no problem, and you can kind of go back in with your eraser as a tool too. So all right, now I'm going to work on the Mallard Hen here. And also what we're going to do here is, since they're pretty fluffy, I just kind of want to start coming in and getting some lines, and whichever way feels comfortable, if pulling towards you or pushing it away from you, and you can do a combination of both. But also kind of I like to get a photograph of a duck and print it out. You can print it out in black and white so it gives you a nice contrast. But here we're not really worrying about having a specific outline of the feathers. We're just kind of getting shapes in here, and then how you put them in, that just kind of denotes the curvature. Okay, and so it's really simple, and I'm not really pressing very hard. And then, as you know, underneath the duck's belly, the feathers kind of get smaller, and so we can just do little smaller, shorter lines. And then what I did here is I kind of gave myself a dotted line, so I'm not making a hard edge for like where some of the wing is and the larger feathers. So that just kind of gives me, so I kind of know where to change stuff up. And same thing with the neck, because the neck comes down into the body, and so I want to follow these curves. And so I'm just kind of coming up here. And it's a lot easier just to start out with lighter pressure. And then you'll go back over this quite a few times, just because that's the nature of, drawing. You're going to slow build up of pencil, as I always say. And then they kind of have a little stripe on their eye, or near their eye, so I did that line to kind of tell me to kind of go over this. more, and then the cheek, we're going to kind of, and just play with how you want to put these in here so that you can see the fuzziness, because the male mallard is, you know, a lot smoother and more solid looking than the mallard hen. So that's why I wanted to kind of do a couple of different versions of the duck. And, you know, don't worry about it if it's not perfect. You know, this is just a class. You're here to learn how to do different techniques. But you can see you're already we're getting in some textures here, so you can kind of see that it's not as smooth of a surface. And this is, you know, hatching and cross hatching is just a nice way to kind of give you some dimension to a drawing without having, you know, solid built up surfaces. Now she looks like she has stripes, but that's fine. I wanted to come in here and do a lot of just hatch marks and kind of get some texture and base color underneath, so that when I will go back and make some darker spots, then that's where I'll do some cross hatching. But I'm going to spend some time just kind of going in and kind of getting some base texture down. And then you'll notice that when you kind of come over here to the wing, the direction of them will change. They will, instead of going down this way, they're going to kind of come back this way because they're lying flat on the wing. So, and then once you get all of the, you know, some like basic shapes in, you can go back over and add more detail. But this, I just kind of wanted to get kind of a textural base. And I'm not being overly precise as to looking, you know, even though I'm looking at an actual photo of a duck, I'm not being overly specific as to how the wing, you know, the size of the feathers and things. But I'm trying to kind of do just the basic general shape. But you're saving yourself time by actually, when you're making your lines, you're creating the shape of the feather versus drawing the feather shape and then filling it in. And this way you're also keeping it a lot softer instead of having that hard edge. And so this is totally doable. Just take your time. You don't have to feel like you are in a rush, because you're going to take more time anyway. And then since I do have a harder edge, you know, pencil edge over here, what you can do is then come in with your eraser like we use and just kind of erase that line in certain areas, and so that it kind of breaks up that hard edge. And then when you're, you know, going back and adding more, then you can just kind of have these overlap. But so you're creating a line and out, you know, the edge of the duck, but you're not having a hard line. She looks kind of fat, but that's good. She's like nice and fluffy. And so then we're gonna keep coming back in here and adding some more. And then just kind of remember that, you know, you're going to do some stuff smaller down here. And then we'll do some bigger ones over here. So we're just going to keep working on it. And then, you know, there are some smoother areas, like down here, this feather back here is smoother, so I'm going to do some longer, really close together lines. And then, you know, you can still kind of fill it in, but I'm just doing lots of lines close together to give it a more solid appearance. Okay. This is all just basic pencil drawing. You guys can do this. It just takes time. And then certain areas that are going to have a little more dark to them, then I'm going to kind of come in and do a little cross hatching, or just kind of go over certain areas to make them darker so there's more contrast. Okay, so there's certain areas in here that I'm going to kind of change direction because I know they're going to be a little bit darker. And then I'm just going to do the line right across it. So immediately by adding the line going across, doing the cross hatching, it makes it already darker. So I'm going to do a little bit of that down here, just to kind of give you an idea of how it works. And you can also change how your lines are. They don't have to follow it exactly. You can kind of come in here and do a little cross hatching like this to kind of add some dark bits, you know, so you can add, you know, different angles of line wherever you are. It doesn't have to all be in this way. So just as long as your main shape is going how, you know, it's on the wing, and then you're just going to change it up. So see, that brings out a different shape in the wings, well, in the feathers, I mean. So see, kind of cool. And as you know, with most of this stuff, it's, you know, we're just going to keep going. And it's just a process, slow build up of pencil. But it's really pretty cool how just adding a few extra lines really kind of changes how things look. So, so we're just doing a little bits of cross hatching just to kind of add some dark parts without, you know. And this also kind of saves your hand a little bit. You don't have to hang on really tightly to the pencil. Just kind of relax and then also kind of experiment here. We want to put in a little bit of a wider swath of dark and kind of. And so you can, you know, do more than a few directions when you're cross hatching too, just to kind of get some other texture in there. And you can have, you know, a picture of a duck in front of you, but then you also can change up. You can have spots, you know, stripes, whatever. It just kind of have some fun with it, you know, or don't feel like you have to make it exactly like the real duck. So it's always just nice to have a reference image. See, so I'm kind of coming back in here and doing some other directional lines, but I'm also kind of keeping it still on a curve. I'm going over my other ones, but, you know, since ducks have that nice rounded jaw, then that's kind of what I'm doing in here. And certainly if there are parts you're like, well, now I can't see what I was doing, or I don't like it as much, that's no problem. You can also use your eraser as a tool and kind of lightly tap stuff off. But I think, you know, she's really kind of fuzzy, so it adds, you know, some visual interest. All right, so you can see I've been continuing to add pencil marks. And so down in here in the little downy areas, you know, you don't have to be really particular. You're just kind of doing little dots of color. Well, not really dots specifically, but putting lots of little lines next to each other to create a shape. And then you're going to keep going, and you can just tell that on some of the certain areas I've just added a little more pressure and just gone over some of my older lines with some darker bits on the tip. So then that way you're adding some contrast. And just kind of play around with it. And then in some areas I did do some cross hatching. Now you can if you want to, you don't have to do cross hatching. You can just do hatch marks, which are just the little, you know, single lines everywhere. Well, you don't have to do any cross hatching across it, but just kind of experiment and see what you like, because it has a little bit of a different effect. Has a little bit of a different look, and you might like one over the other. But then you're just kind of coming back in. A lot of this has a lot of midtones in it, and remember, if you want really bright whites, leave the paper showing. Okay, and then so we're going to kind of come back in and add some contrast, because we know underneath the duck, she's, you know, in shadow underneath here. So you're just going to kind of keep adding little bits of layers of pencil, okay? But I know you'll take time with this. But you get the idea. It's a slow build up. And if there are certain... And then you can come back in with your eraser and... You need to erase that part, but... And just change the, you know, hardness, or you can soften certain areas. But... Just part of it's experimentation, and you're just kind of learning how to do this. And you know, if there's some shading under the feet, I'm going to kind of come in and add some more line work. Okay. So now she's really kind of fluffy, and I'll continue to work on here, but I'll start working on the male mallard here, just to kind of give you an idea. And now also remember, you can tell I forgot to put my paper under my hand to keep from dragging across the pencil. So, but then you can just take your big eraser and erase your smudges. So, all right, now we're going to work on the male mallard, and he's a lot smoother than she is. So, and I, have got a harder line, outside of him, and you don't have to do that either. You can do something really, softer as well. But he is a lot more, brighter in tone, but using the pencil, it's going to just seem darker because he's smoother in certain areas. So we're going to kind of come in and do some of the same stuff. And I'm just using little lines close together and just kind of in keeping with the roundness of his head. And I kind of already kind of gave myself some areas that I knew, were lighter or darker, so I wanted to kind of separate them out ahead of time. And then on his chest here, he's got, I'm just gonna start adding some lines like we were on hers. And then what you can do later is you can come in and add like little lines to really denote, some of his feathers, like this or whatever. But right now I'm just kind of coming in to get the basic shapes going so I can kind of help myself with filling it in. But I'm just doing little lines. And so that's also helping give, the shape of the duck too. And I'm just gonna... And he's really pretty dark, on his whole head and neck area, so you can keep these really close together. I'm still gonna... So you're saving yourself time and your finger and your hand too by just using your pencil lines as the shape too. And I'm just kind of keeping in with how his little feathers underneath are. So I'm going to jump up here into his head, because this you're just going to keep going and keep adding. But this has more texture to it than his head. His head's pretty smooth, so we're just going to keep doing this down here. And same thing with back here. We'll kind of change the angle of the pencil just because his body angle is changing, and so we can kind of get this idea. You kind of saw that in the other one too. But if it helps, sometimes do a few the way you want to do it in an area and kind of jump, and so that you don't forget. So you're kind of helping yourself, giving yourself some clues how things are supposed to be. So what I'm going to do up here is kind of come up to his head here and just going to do some long lines because it's his neck is also. What I'm going to do is just kind of do a layer of short lines on top of each other. And just kind of be aware. Sometimes it's easy to flatten it out, I think, because I just kind of flattened it out right there, because he still is on a, his neck still is on a curve around. So we're just adding lots of little short lines to fill in the color. And so I'm just kind of going back in with some cross hatching to kind of make it more of a solid color, but still have some visual texture. And I'm still, you know, doing it on a curve. And you can even do some circular shading too, because if you're having a hard time with some of the cross, oops, I just messed up this little white on him. And so this is another instance where, you know, you could go in here and kind of help yourself, because he's got that collar, white collar, to so you don't accidentally do what I just did and go over it. And I'll soften this line too. And then even though he's solid up here, I'm still going to soften this hard edge. Same thing with over here. All right, you can see that I've filled some of this in more. And with the head, you know, I just did a lot of little short lines, and you just kind of go back over them. And if it helps, do, you know, a circular motion underneath, and that kind of gives you a base color, you know, just a kind of a nice gray. And then you can kind of go back in on top and do some of your harder short lines. So you're still adding a lot of nice visual texture, but you're making it darker, and you're not still having a solid, you know, gray. Because, you know, mallards are really pretty, and they have all that, you know, velvety looking feathery stuff. So, and just keep going softly. So like on the stuff back here, you don't have to individually do, you know, feathers. I'm just kind of going in and getting some curvature of its body. And because you don't really see a lot of this stuff, you just see, you know, just kind of creamy color. And so for his chest here, which is still really pretty dark, you know, it's closer, it's just a little bit lighter than his head. I've just started going in and kind of darkening some of this stuff. And you can see I added some little lines in here to kind of look like the feathers, just to kind of add some extra visual. But then I'm going to go back in and still add some little bits darker. So I'm just going to keep layering it in here, and then just kind of closing off the amount of white that's in there. And you don't have to be precise. This is just kind of taking up the space and filling in the color, so you're not, well, filling in the paper so you don't have all the white showing through. And here again, you can go in and actually kind of fill in with the pencil. Like I'm just doing light circular motions to kind of add some gray under there to kind of knock back the white. And I'm not pressing very hard at all, but just by doing little circular motions next to each other, it kind of fills up the space. And it also keeps things from getting too flat just by doing it in a circular motion. So that starts kind of darkening the space. So we can do a little bit more of that. And just by having this kind of underneath, that'll help when we go back on top with some of the, you know, hatch marks. Then we'll do those even darker. But right now we're just kind of getting in here and getting white knocked back. And I'm just doing small, I'm just kind of moving it around. It's, like I said, it doesn't have to be precise. And so then I can come back in and just make it a little bit darker. And I'm trying to kind of keep it looking like the, layers of feathers, and they just have those little lines that you can see, but I'm trying to keep them on a curve. But then here again, you can also go back in and add your little lines. So it's just really a combination of all of it. So you're doing some hatch marks, and you can come in and do some cross hatching, but it looks a little different part also because you're doing this really on a small scale, so it's a little bit easier just to kind of do the hatching and then the kind of little scribbly circles. So you can go over the lines you just made with some vertical lines like what you've been doing, and that kind of fills in the space. Now give your hand a break too, because some of this can be kind of tedious. So then kind of come back and just do some of the circling and but you get the idea. There's all sorts of different ways of drawing and filling in space, but I just kind of like to give you different options so that you can kind of make up your own mind what you like. And so if you like something like this better, then just keep doing that. But then also you can come back and add some little darker. And remember, this is a slow process. So you're going to have lots of layers of pencil. Because anything that's highly textural, it just takes some time. And then you want to remember that you still want to have some contrast. So the front end of him is going to have, be a lot darker. And you can kind of keep this other stuff lighter. And then remember, if you go, oh, that's a really harsh line, go back in with your eraser and kind of soften it or tap it. That just kind of breaks it up a little bit. And then just try to remember not to run your hand across it. And then you can use your big eraser to clean some stuff up. Okay. So, and then for this stuff, I'm just gonna, and then just be aware, if your directional lines, you're still gonna kind of do lines along the duck's body and how the feathers are lining on the back. Whoop, I'm doing this one backwards, so. And then see where it's kind of really dark on some of these tail feathers down here. I just kind of filled it in and then did some cross hatching to kind of add some even darker areas just to kind of keep it visually interesting. So it's darker, but it's not totally flat. The more you do this, the more comfortable you'll get. So, and then I'm going to come back in here. Yep, and I keep taking my hand off my paper and smearing my. That happens. So. And then you can also experiment with down here, just kind of, I'm just going to do a long line where I'm kind of doing short lines, but keeping them all kind of together. So it's going to look like a big long line of feathers. And then I'll come in under here. So I start out narrow and then get a little wider and kind of come up. So I'm kind of doing it in a little U. But I kind of made them a little fatter than I intended, and that's okay. You can still kind of come back and block it out. I just like the visual texture, you know, versus really smooth something. But like I said, you feel free to put your own spin on it. And like I said, I know you guys will be spending, you know, a lot more time on this than we're doing in the video. So, but see what I'll do, and you know, this, I kind of like the look of this. These kind of get smaller, but then you can kind of come back in and change how some of this stuff looks up top, okay? And just the duck shape is kind of really pretty simple, you know, with the big oval, and you can do little tail feathers. I happen to like feet. You can also start drawing it in the water, you know, so you would have them cut off, which is fine. And just take your time and just experiment with your hatching and cross hatching and, you know, little scribbling little circles. But and then down here, you know, we can kind of come back up here like this with the cross hatching, just to kind of give a little bit of texture and kind of show a little bit of shadow, make it a little bit darker. And then you just kind of keep going, and then it's going to continue to come together. And then, like I said, if you kind of got a little bit, if you got some of your white collar covered up, then you can kind of come in with the edge of your eraser and kind of knock down some of those lines. And then you can kind of come back in and add the shape in again. And then just do a nice little light edge. So, whoop. Okay. So there's a couple of, you know, different ways of doing your duck and showing how, you know, the difference between the smoother surface or, you know, fuzzier, and just using your cross hatching and hatching in different ways. So we'll just keep going, and, you know, I'll finish it up here, but this gives you an idea of how to go about it, and then totally experiment with how you want to do it too, because that's always a great way just to keep learning. Because it's a class, and you know, I'm giving you some basics of how one way to do it, but then also it's good for you all to figure out what you enjoy and what works for you. So, all right, take good care of yourselves, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.